Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Series 1, The Peoples of Chult and the Peninsula. I'm your guide, Graham, and this is Lore Diver, the podcast about lore, world building, and alternative takes on all that sort of stuff that'll help improve your game and just generally make things better. So, what am I covering tonight? Well, tonight I am on to the Aarakocra. I'm not 100% sure on how to pronounce this, and odds are I'm going to be mangling this name through the entire go tonight, but that's how it is sometimes. It's the Aarakocra. They appear in one of the many side events of the Tomb of Annihilation. It's not a required area to go to, but it happens, and I was actually kind of fascinated as I researched these guys, because as opposed to a lot of other creatures in the game where they sort of crop up once in a while and so on and then disappear, these ones actually, the Aarakocra, have a long history, not just in the game not just in the campaign setting, but also in the game. And it was really cool to learn about that as I was doing the research for it. It was really awesome. So let's dive into some lore about the Aarakocra. So first off, the history and the editions. First edition, they're there right away. They are another fiend folio monster, much like the Tabaxi that I covered a couple of weeks ago. And they go from terrifying birdmen to player race in first edition, which is amazing as far as I'm concerned, especially given the conditions in the time and the thoughts around what you could or could not play or what you should or should not play. So the depiction in the Fiend Folio is very much along the lines of first edition's make everything hideous so players will want to kill it styles of art. The Aarakocra in first edition look awful. Not only do they not look like they could fly, but they look like some sort of like weird mangy bird demon thing with like a blunt beak, and they do not look nearly as cool or nearly as majestic as they would develop into. But their form they take, the overall morphology of them, will remain consistent until 5th edition. That being that they are basically an anthropomorphic bird with wings that are also their arms. And they've got like some pretty epic looking feet for carrying things and doing stuff with. So right off the hop, they're in the game. That's pretty cool. They make a lot of appearances in adventures and across several campaign settings, not just in the standard D&D stuff, but they also make an appearance in Dragonlance and a few other places. So they were getting around pretty quickly, and they proved so popular that they make an appearance as an official player race well ahead of a lot of other monsters. And this is in Dragon issue number 124, which opens up with a statement by the article author, J.E. Keeping, that I'm going to read out here. So, and this is a direct quote from the article. One problem with the AD&D game is the lack of variety in the races available to PCs and NPCs. They all resemble humans in mind and body. The DMG claims that this is necessary to keep the powerful monster races away from the PCs, remain within the game's human-centric basis, and avoid all the rule adjustments needed to bring non-humanoid characters into the game. Yet there are a number of creatures in the game which are sufficiently similar to humans in power and form as to avoid endangering game balance or convenience, yet different enough from humans to provide welcome variety to the game. One of these, the Aarakocra, is the subject of this article. Now, that may sound familiar to some people, and it would sound familiar for good reason. This is something that I've been saying for ages. It's something that a lot of people have been saying for ages, and that's that there's no reason not to let people play these things. And there's no reason not to let people, get outside the box. And for some reason, they just fought it forever. Anyways, so great opening statement, goes into describing them as a race. And then if you want to see the most like late 70s, early 80s comic book style disco fantastic image of an Aarakocra, you can go online, you can find Dragon issue number 124 and look on page 35. It's like gold and purple and just Wow. And that would actually also set a tone for the further editions going down the road. That being that, yeah, the Aarakocra art is just wild, and just gets weirder and weirder until it sort of stabilizes and gets more normal, for lack of a better term, in 5th edition. Like 3rd edition, they were like anthropomorphic parrots. It was nuts. And they also get a canonical deity in 1st edition, and that is Kokra. Incredibly creatively named there. He's a pretty standard neutral good sort of god. He's got a couple of +2 javelins, and they actually try to. You can see they're still trying to normalize the idea of the 7th ability score, comeliness, because it's included in his stat line. His comeliness is like 8 to non-Aarakocras and like 27 to Aarakocras. So yeah, that was the thing. So 2nd edition, the hits keep on coming, and if you know where to look for them. So in this edition, what's going on is there's a lot of information on the Aarakocra, but it's a lot of information only if you know where to look for it. So they appear in the Monsters Compendium and then later in the Monster Manual. That's pretty normal, all that sort of good stuff. Then they come back as a playable race in the Complete Book of Humanoids. And this is one of the many of the little like brown and gray covered splat books that 2nd edition was either famous or infamous for, depending on your point of view. So they appear in there, and then they finally appear later in the Player's Options, Skills, and Powers book, as well as in other campaign settings, most notably Dark Sun. Dark Sun sort of grabbed the Aarakocra and ran hard with them, which I think is pretty awesome. That's going to make me reread some Dark Sun, because I don't remember that, but it said it was from the updated set that we didn't have. So now, linking to the Tomb of Annihilation, linking to Chult. That happens in this edition, in 2nd edition. And they are mentioned as being residents of the jungle of Chult. There's no stat lines given for them, no directions to where you could find their information. Pretty much starting the long tradition of not telling people where stuff is in the game. And so, yeah, that was how that went. They're mentioned, and that's all. I don't even recall them playing a part in it aside from like being a possible random encounter. And they get a 2nd canonical deity, Sirenita, who is noted for being not just a good aligned goddess, but also a legitimately good person. Kind of rare for deities in Dungeons and Dragons to actually, not just be good in alignment, but also to be good in how they act. Like apparently Sirenita is all about making friends and everything else like that. However, at this point, they've also forgotten that Kokra exists. And this actually sets a different trend that we'll see continue through the editions. That being that they get a new god every so often, and the old ones are just, whatever, forgotten. What do you need them around for? So, 3rd edition, full recognition and decent support. So 3rd edition sees a whole lot of awesome stuff happening with the Aarakocra. They appear both in the Monsters of Faerun book and in the Races of Faerun book, effectively moving them from the sidelines and from being, an optional player race into being something that's official and endorsed by the game as something that your players can play. And that is fantastic. There's also some supporting online articles that expand on the information presented in the Monsters of Faerun. And I checked those articles out, and they're really neat because they focus in on the Aarakocra making extensive use of, portal magic to link up different colonies and to allow them to explore the world more effectively. Unfortunately, not a single one of these was actually attached to Chult. There's 2 that were going on up in the Cormyr area and the Vilhan Reach region. There's one out in Malhorand, and there's one somewhere else in that general part of the world. So there's none of that went down to Chult. In fact, they aren't mentioned around being in Chult at all in this edition, insofar as I've been able to find. And like I said, before. If you know better, please let me know, and I will correct myself. So that's all fantastic. There is some weirdness going on because they finally start getting some cultural descriptions going on here, and it's just it's a different type of problematic. It's not the monsters are all awful and have non-functional societies sort of thing. Instead, they get the very stereotypical concept of what a hunter-gatherer society is, where all the male Aarakocra spend their days hunting and out of the area, and all the female Aarakocra spend their time back at the giant communal nest that they live in, making tools, preparing food, and like basically being domestic staff. And it's just sort of like, really, guys, like this is your best interpretation? I mean, like, you couldn't have at least like cracked a book open about, I don't know, how birds work, because often like, and make them have them maybe trade off or something, or just do something else that's not, men hunt, women stay home. Like that's just lame. It's weak. Anyways, and they get a new god in this edition. The old gods are gone. Cyrenita's gone. Cocra's gone now, and they've all been replaced by Eridi Fianna, the elven weather god, because why not? I mean, there's all sorts of weird sort of things happening in 3rd edition, trying to link them to the element of air and stuff like that, and maybe some broad hinting that they have a deeper history that's not really being dipped into, but they don't actually like do any of that, and they just give them this elven weather god. And that was 3rd edition. So 4th edition, 4th edition's gonna 4th edition. They're excised from the Forgotten Realms, like just about everything else. They're cut out, and they were barely remembered for the Dark Sun material that came out. So yeah, 4th edition, the whole place gets smashed up. It may have actually affected a number of the colonies that they had. There's no information whatsoever about them that I've been able to find in the Forgotten Realms. Yeah, do I hear 4 gods? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 4th edition just... 4th edition is almost always depressing to go to in these things. Except for the Suruk. It was really awesome for them, but yeah, not for these dudes. So, 5th edition. They're back. Sort of. They're not nearly as well supported, but they're here-ish. So, what's happened here is a lot of stuff. In a very small amount of pages, and spread out across several different campaign books in such a way that it makes it difficult to track. So the first big thing that changed in 5th edition is there's a morphology shift. Previously, their arms and wings have been the same. 5th edition does away with that and gives them a set of wings on their back and a set of arms that they can do other things with. This dramatically changes everything. It opens up a ton of options in their lives for combat and doing stuff. They don't have to do everything with their feet anymore while they're flying. And they appear first in the monster manual, which is great. And while they are a specific component of one of the bigger possible events in Tomb of Annihilation, and being tied to Chult more definitively than previously, in that they're actually like specifically in the adventure, their stats don't appear there. Neither is any direction to where you can find their stats, and their stats do in fact exist in 5th edition. However, in order to get those stats, Tomb of Annihilation is not the place you want to look. What you in fact want to look for is the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, which was a free PDF enhancement offered by Wizards of the Coast for the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign setting that was released a couple of years earlier. Now, just quick segue here about that. If you're looking to add some more official options to your D&D game, the Elemental Evil Player's Companion is still free to download from Wizards of the Coast. It is a fantastic little module enhancement in of itself. It contains player race information for the Genasi, Goliath, Deep Gnome, and Aarakocra, and has a ton of new spells in the back. So it is an incredibly useful and incredibly handy thing to get if you're looking for that. It's worth picking up. It takes like a minute to download, and just on that, it is right now currently the only place you can find the Genasi information. So if you want Genasi in your game, so you're playing in or around Chult where there should be Genasi, anything else like that, or up in Akinol where there's, as far as I can tell, still a kingdom of Genasi there. That's where you'll find all their information. So off that segue, history in the campaign setting. So you'd think that being around for so many editions would give them some history to work with, and it's unfortunate to say, but you would be wrong. They're only mentioned once in the whole of the grand history of the realms, and that is for the year 1418 Dale Reckoning, the year of the Eagle's Flight, which is a pretty good name for what happened. And this is when the first Aarakocra colonists arrive to northern Faerun after generations of migrating island to island across the trackless sea from distant Maztica. And that is a direct quote from the book. So what's happened here is that the Aarakocra are, in fact, native to Faerun in the analogs for the Americas and possibly Katashaka and like the African analog that was sort of added in. They're from over there. And if you get a hold of the Rare as Hen's Teeth maps for Maztica and Faerun, you can see there's a bunch of little islands coming off. It's from like southern part of it's just south of Maztica and north of Katashaka. There's a string of islands that basically leads up before one hell of a long flight to get over to Chult. It basically drops you right at the right into the Shining South and Chult area. And so they went through all of that and then finally migrated north into the areas where they've actually been developed. And I'll take a moment here to say that that is the only place that they have been significantly developed at all in previous editions, and that is away from Chult. Chult doesn't get anything until 5th edition, where in 1491-ish DR, because I'm still not sure if it's the Tomb of Annihilation is in 1491 or 1492, but the last of the Omu royal family have taken refuge with the Aarakocra of the Kirt Sabal Monastery in Chult. And that's it. Like, they're not involved in any of the nonsense that's going on, even though you'd think they'd be taking an interest in it. They're not involved in any conflicts with the Terramen, which you think they would be because they're competing for space, and probably targets on the ground for food. Yeah, it's just sort of like this monastery of bird people in the middle of Chult. Well, not in the middle, it's up on a mountain, but yeah, that's their history as presented specifically. So what is their current state in the campaign setting? Well, the best way to describe it is the way that you would describe an endangered species that is starting to bounce back a bit, in that they are recovering-ish, sort of. So they were excised in 4th edition. They got some coverage in 3rd. The biggest issue is that there's no real information past the information that's in Tomb of Annihilation about what's going on with them in the areas where they had larger populations canonically in previous editions. So there were 4 major colonies in Faerun. Previous to that, that was the Starmounts near the High Forest, the Stormhorns near Cormyr, the Cloven Mountains and the Vilhan Reach, and the Mistcliffs of Chult. The Mistcliffs of Chult is all that's left right now. And the I think that's where they had, or I can't remember if that monastery is there or not. I'd have to check that. But the Mistcliffs are on the, let's see here, look at my Chult map. Yeah. So the Mist Cliffs are on the western side, and I believe the monastery is more towards the center. I think that was down. Yeah, I think that was near the Peaks of Flame. I think I cannot remember. I probably should have looked that up before doing this, but here we are. I'll survive. So, yeah, that was it. Like they had 4 big colonies, and the one in the Star Mounts is mentioned as having been destroyed by a green dragon, which is never good. And yeah, which of any of these remain, if any, is currently unconfirmed at this time. We do know that there are some Aarakocra in Chult. We know that there's enough of them. There's a monastery, but past that, like whether or not they have a significant population still in the Mist Cliffs, who knows? Whether there are any survivors in the Star Mounts or Stormhorns and Cormier, unknown. And like, to be perfectly honest, that whole area was a giant war zone with Netheril and their giant floating shadow city. So that usually doesn't bode too well. Cloven Mountains of the Vilhan Reach. The Vilhan Reach got pounded pretty bad too. It may have survived, but that's unknown. One could hope. So yeah, that's pretty much their situation. It is grim. So yeah. Now my take on how things could go. I love the Aarakocra. I think they're awesome. I much prefer their look now. They look aesthetically more pleasing and more fun to play than they did in previous editions, which I think is fantastic, because in previous editions they looked awful. It was like disco parrots. All bright colors and weirdness, which is fine. I mean, if you want like bright colors and weirdness in your bird people, they'll go for it. But I like the new raptor sort of look that's going on, and I've seen some pretty sweet fan art of other birds being used as patterns for them, and I think that's all pretty sweet as well. So, what would I do to change things up? Well, the first big thing is that I would link them definitively to and I'm going to mangle this name, that is the Erie. I'm just going to call them the Eries. The Eries. And in case you're wondering how that's spelled, it's Aearee. So I'm not 100% on how to pronounce that at all. But the Eries, they were the avian creator race. They were in competition with the Batrachi, who were the amphibian and fish ones, and the Yuan-Tis creators, the Sirach, all that sort of thing. They were one of these major groups. And they came to power in minus 31,000 Dale Reckoning. Now, their empire just sort of exploded all over the place because they were taking land and territory that nobody else was interested in at the time. Mostly it was colder climates, and it was also way up in the mountains. And those are both places where the Sirach and the Batrachi had 0% interest in expanding into, because it wasn't inimical to their lives. So I would link them definitely to them, and there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost is that there's a mention of the Aarakocra, and it's AEAREE dash COCRA, and to me that sounds like an old pronunciation or an old title to the modern Aarakocra, and it gives them a bit more of a history in the setting, and not just a bit more history. It gives a ancestral conflict against the Gnolls, because whatever created the Gnolls sort of left them to their own devices, and the Gnolls got into a fight with the Aarakocra and the Aries, and actually ended up summoning a whole bunch of demons to like blight their crops and do a bunch of other stuff like that to them, which is like pretty awful and war crimey. But it gives a reason for perhaps some sort of dislike between the two groups. It also gives them a cool link to I'm probably going to mangle this too, Wyverns, because in Forgotten Realms, Wyverns were a creation of the Aerie, and they took landworms and said, you know what, this isn't scary enough. Sure, it's got teeth and scales, and it's hard as hell, but we could make it more badass, and we'll do that by giving it wings and a giant scorpion stinger, and then we'll use it to like ravage everything on the ground. So they did, and yeah, giving that sort of link in the game to me is awesome, because now all of a sudden it's not just the Aarakocra. You now have Aarakocra and their like basically like domesticated Wyvern allies, able to go forth and wreak havoc and do all sorts of things, which is great. The other reason I would link them up to this group is that it gives a reason for the migration of the Aarakocra to Faerun in the first place. Because, the world gets broken up. Like, the Aerie kingdoms all start collapsing around 30,000. Minus 30,000 DR. And then the world gets broken up by the Sundering. It happens in, like, minus 17 or so. 1,000 DR. And the world's shattered. Everything's spread out. Everything's different. Everything's awful. And the Aarakocra want to get access to the... they want to get access to this old magic. And perhaps even access to their old creators. Because there's nothing... Unlike the other creator races, which seems to go from zero to evil in like a heartbeat, everything about the Aarakocra and so on seems to indicate that the Aerie were the good guys. Like, they were probably good aligned, not trying to enslave the world, not trying to destroy everything. And if you read in the Grand History of the Realms, there's a really cool excerpt, and it's a letter from an explorer back to Candlekeep, where he talks about discovering a floating city in the far north, hidden in the ice, that appears to be abandoned, and it's full of murals of scaled, feathered, and winged creatures who are doing things, and they think that it might be the Aerie. And I think it would be awesome if the reason that the Aarakocra at least initially migrated across all that distance was because they were trying to find that. And it gives cool reasons for your characters, like for Aarakocras to be found up in the north doing things and running around and stuff, past, just living there, or as in some of the descriptions for the web enhancement material, living there and harassing caravans because they're using animals to pull things, and so they're like assaulting the staff of the caravans because that was the thing they were doing. So I would do that. More specific to Chult, I would give them a kingdom, or whatever you want to call it. They've been there forever. Chult desperately needs more stable places in it. Like, it's already packed with all kinds of dangers. There's environmental dangers, there's undead, there's dinosaurs, diseases, all the monsters, there's grung, like the list just goes on and on and on and on of all the ways that Chult is going to try to kill, blind, disease, or enslave your character, or possibly all at the same time. And there's very little in the way of sort of like safe zones or stable areas where players can get to and feel a bit of respite. And as I've said before, one of the goals in TOA was to create, a feeling of unending like claustrophobia and fear in the setting. And that's why they didn't want to put villages out into the jungle. And I argue that if you give characters some respite, but they're still surrounded by all of that, that atmosphere stays, even if the characters do get to rest for a little bit. And so I would give them back the Mist Cliffs. Like, I think there was kobolds or something in there, and like fire newts down towards the south of that area. And like, seriously, like, just give the Aarakocra the Mist Cliffs. Let them have that. Develop them. Give them some form of governance. You know, that's not. Like, it doesn't have to be a hunter-gatherer thing. And in fact, that's the next point, and that's I would drop the hunter-gatherer description of their society, because it's so bad and so stereotyped and so, like, not how hunter-gatherer societies work. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in hunter-gatherer societies, and like just the romanticized and like antiquated like vision of it was just like men going out and hunting and women staying back and doing a little bit of gathering and mostly just like huddling in fear waiting for the men to come back. I mean, come on. Aarakocra, they've got wings, they've got talons, they've got all this stuff they can do. So why not, give them some opportunities and chances to, be more. So I would drop that. And in the context of the Mist Cliffs, I would give them. I think I would go with like some sort of a like philosophical council or something like that, because you have this monastery, and that's the only presentation of them that we're given, and so I would build it up around. This is their first landing spot. It's their biggest colony, their main colony. There's thousands of them there. They sustain themselves with lots of stuff out of the ocean and occasionally forays into the jungle. They are in conflict with the Terrafolk because they're both after the same sorts of territory. And I would give them like maybe a relationship with the Fire Newts. I mean, the Fire Newts are, they can be evil. Well, I think they are evil, described as evil in the books. But they need metal. They need resources and stuff like that. And when you're covered in feathers and have wings, being a smith is probably not the safest thing for you. So I would have maybe as a point of contention happening that, when the dwarves were kicked out of their mines and the Fire Newts took over, the Aarakocra just sort of seamlessly slid into trading with the Fire Newts, saying, hey, great, you guys are in charge now. That's fantastic. Here's what we need. Can you provide these goods for us? So do that. And I would also give them a link to Port Nyanzaru, because trade is a big thing, and getting word from other colonies or word of other colonies would be coming through there. So I would throw some Aarakocra into that area as well. Now, I realize that there is one big issue with the Aarakocra as a player race for a lot of people, and that's that they are not Adventurer League legal. Now, I'm not incredibly familiar with the Adventurer League. Personally, I'm not a fan of some of the concepts built into it, this being one of them. But from what I understand, in different tiers of play, there's abilities that characters can and cannot have, and flight is one of them, and Aarakocra can fly. So this does throw a bit of a wrench in the gears if you're trying to use them in Adventurer League games. However, if you're not playing in the Adventurers League, if you're just, playing at home or, pick-up games or what have you, with friends, then yes, the Aarakocra works. However, I feel that I need to mention that is one big glaring issue that they have as a player race in the game, and that's, that flight ability is apparently an issue. So, yeah. That's really about it for the Aarakocra. It's a little bit of a shorter episode tonight. But there was just... They already fit in so many ways that there wasn't a lot for me to really go into. It wasn't like the dwarves, and it wasn't like the Batiri goblins or Suruk or anything else like that. They're already there. They're already doing stuff. They're already active. I think the only thing that I would add for like my take on how things could be done with them within the context of Chult is the last two things. Is A, I would expand them eastward into the Hazard Mountains, and through the mountains that aren't occupied by the Terrafolk, because people need space and they need resources. So I would expand them out so they covered more territory and were part of more places in that general region. And the other thing that I would do with them is I would, how do I put it? Just lost my train of thought completely. That's awesome. Jeez. Yeah, right. So the other thing that I would do with them is I would actually use them to link up to Lantan. Lantan is an island to the northwest of Chult. It is well within flight distance, based on the island hopping that they were doing to get over to Faerun proper. And Lantan has been left out of a lot of stuff in 5th edition, and like just about every edition really, but like 5th edition quite a bit. And I think that the Aarakocra, because they are generally good, because they are generally friendly, would be a fantastic liaison to contact the fairly closed and apparently right now a little bit paranoid people of Lantan, because that was something that it didn't strike me at the time when I was just going through Tomb of Annihilation, but Lantan should have been mentioned or part of it, because it's right there. Their submarines, and yes, I mean submarines, are like off the coast of Chult at any given point. And so if you have the Mist Cliffs and you have Aarakocra there, use them to link up with Lantan and have them as being, sort of the link between the humans of Chult, Port Nyanzaru, and all that sort of stuff, and these crazy Gond worshipping, technology making lunatics that are on Lantan. So that would be a big thing I would do, just to sort of expand the world and get things going a little nicer, a little more interestingly. So yeah, that's it. The Aarakocra, they have been around since 1st edition. They've been available as a player race since 1st edition, and they are available as one again, provided that you get that free download of the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, which again, cannot recommend enough. It's a fantastic little book. So, next episode, I'm hitting up Fire Newts. And depending on how much information I can find about them, I may decide to double it up and do another 2-for episode like I did with the Batiri Goblins and the Grung. But yeah, the main focus will be Fire Newts, those crazy, maybe lizard folk, maybe not lizard folk, but definitely fire infused, riding crazy strider beasts and taking over significant parts of underground Chult. Fire Newts. So should be pretty fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much for listening. This has been Lord Iver, the POCGamer podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. If you would like to see more, head over to my blog, POCGamer.com, and check out POCGamer on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you want to support this podcast, there's links to coffee on my blog and on my social media, and I also have a Patreon going on, where today I actually gave out my first Hexcrawl micro map to my supporters there. So they've got that with a, it's got a map, it's got some random tables on it, a whole bunch of cool stuff, and that's like something that you get just at the base level tier. So check out my Patreon if you have a chance to. Music was provided by purple-planet.com. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.